Today, we are delving into the fascinating world of supervised visitation. Why would a court ever order supervised visitation? Why would a parent ever agree to it? Is there ever a time that you want your visitation to be supervised? In a situation where supervised visitation is necessary, where can you find it? How affordable can it be? And how can it help you build a relationship with your child?
Ruby Bolton is the founding attorney for the Bolton Law Firm, one of the largest law firms specializing in divorce located in Montgomery County, Texas, including a practice in Harris County. Ruby Bolton is board certified as a family law specialist by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. Ruby is a super lawyer designated by Thomson Reuters. Ruby is one of the best, designated by the Houston Chronicle, and she would love to share everything she's learned in the last 30 years with you.
Hi, welcome to Divorce Decoded with Ruby Bolton. I'm the founding attorney of Bolton Law, and we explore in this podcast what can go wrong in a divorce and what you can do to make it go right. I am super excited to have a special guest with me today. I am pleased to welcome Dr. Gloria Fawcett. We are going to explore today what the courts and attorneys do if there are concerns about a child being safe when they are with their parent. So, Dr. Fawcett, one of the reasons I'm super excited to have you in particular here is because in general I tell people that there are two options for supervised visitation. And one is with the county-run program, which is nonprofit, and the other is with a third-party supervision program. I've got to say, you are the only person I have ever met who is connected really with both worlds. So I thought we would talk a little bit about first the government programs or the nonprofit programs.
Wonderful, yes. So I became a board member at Access Builds Children last year.
So just to clarify, that is the program that is run in Montgomery County, correct?
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
And I was invited to join the board by Becca Smith-Nash, and she selected me specifically because of my interest in supervised visitation, as well as my background in science, since I have I spent almost 2 decades doing objective, unbiased research for the medical community. And you can bring a lot of those same skills and techniques to bear when you're developing your policies and procedures for supervised visitation.
I appreciate that. And I will tell you, I think for people in general, it's difficult for them to understand how a third party can step into that parent-child relationship, and facilitate that. And I think in general, the solution that I've seen is you want to be as business-like and as neutral as possible. Would you agree?
I completely agree. Yes, the idea is to remain calm, professional, distant. You don't want to invite either party to view you as an opportunity for bias, for listening to their story, being a shoulder. That's not our role. Our role is really to focus on the safety of the children and provide information to the lawyers, to the court, of exactly what occurs during the supervised visits.
And so let's talk for a little bit about what different types of situations result in supervised visitation. So when you have parents who are requiring a supervisor when they visit their children, sometimes that's a result of a court order, right? And sometimes it's an agreement between the parties that there's going to be a supervisor there whenever they have visitation. What are the different situations that you've seen that result in either a court order or the parties voluntarily agreeing to have a supervisor?
I would say One of the most common that we run into is suspected parental alienation. That's very common. And it may not necessarily be that commonly experienced. It's certainly that commonly accused.
So just to give our audience a little background, parental alienation, that's a term that you and I have heard a whole lot over the last, I would say, 15 years, I think, is
Absolutely.
when we first started really hearing a lot about it.
Correct.
And where I first heard of it was in the context of parents telling the court, yes, my child is refusing to see me, but it's not because I've done anything wrong. It's because the other parent is causing the child not to want to see me, right?
Correct.
And you're saying that you see that suspected a lot more often than you see it in reality.
I wouldn't say that because I
Okay.
don't make a conclusion about whether it's real or not, but it definitely is something that is accused very frequently. And I would be really surprised if so many parents are inclined to poison their children against the other parent with abandon.
So it's interesting that you say with abandon, because I will definitely agree that I've seen cases where it's done very sneakily,
Yes.
you know? And I will even say I'm a divorced parent myself, and that's something that I was very concerned about,
Yes.
you know, trying to make the transition as easy for my children as possible, I'm bending over backwards not to try to say negative things about their father. In fact, I remember one of my daughters made an impression on me. Why do you always defend him? You're not even married to him, you know. But I would find myself every now and then, there's just, I don't know, a funny little quip you want to say or something, and before you know it, it's out.
Oh, sure.
And you're like,
Absolutely.
"Oops, that probably was not one of my finer moments."
But I think that for something to be, now I am not a lawyer,
All right.
thank goodness, but it seems.
Now, hold on. There's nothing wrong with being a lawyer. So let's just make sure when you say thank goodness, you're not saying that, right?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is I find that a lot of the lawyers I speak to have a lot of care on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would be a bit more than I would be comfortable carrying. So with the perspective that I take, where we are unbiased, I don't have to worry about taking sides. I don't have to worry about who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah, so
I just have to
you're not
maintain
there to
safety.
make a judgment, right?
No, I'm not.
Yeah. So my last guest that I interviewed on this podcast was a parenting evaluator. Now, he gave reports to the court. You give reports, but what do you put in the reports that you give?
Oh, that's a great question. So the reports that we give, we try to provide enough detail so that if there is something that raises some concern in the eyes of the monitor, something that was said to the child, something that made the child uncomfortable. It's usually the reaction of the child that makes us pay closer attention. We like to make sure that we focus on those details, try to get as close to perfect recall of what was said. We don't record all of our visits because that would be prohibitively expensive to keep all of that tape stored. So we write reports with our recollections. We take detailed notes during the course of the conversations, and we write down observable facts. So, for example, if a child runs up and gives a father a hug, we will say, the child ran up and gave the father a hug. We will not say, the child was so excited to see the father and giggled in glee, right?
Right. You're just gonna report on what happened.
Just the basics of what happened, yes. And if they said something, we'll say that. If they were, I guess the closest we'll come to an emotional evaluation is if they show excitement, but we won't try to interpret whether it is based in anger or happiness. We'll just say they were excited and use the body language, description, and the words to carry the rest of the message.
So just to kind of go back to where I said, what kinds of situations do you find, end up requiring supervised visitation? You mentioned parental alienation, which that's not a finding that the court is going to make, but a lot of times we'll have a situation where, for whatever reason, there's not been contact for a very long time, right?
For many different reasons, yes.
Right.
Anything from a parent feeling as though their access was blocked, maybe because one parent asked them to do things that they thought were unreasonable. Like I said, we don't make a value judgment on that, but sometimes it is because they were in prison. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's because one parent moved away from the other was unable to follow. And sometimes it was deliberate on one party or the other. So I did have one case where a mother was pregnant when she divorced, and they had 3 other children.
Which, by the way, I'm guessing she didn't admit that to the court, because my judges won't generally enter a divorce with a person pregnant.
She must not have said.
Well, I'm not saying it never happens.
Yes.
I'm just guessing the judge was unaware.
It was in a different state. It was not in Texas. And for that particular family, the father had not met the child, the youngest child, until the child was 6.
Yeah. And there you have a situation where you might have a child scared or worried, or the other parent is very worried, but maybe the visiting parent doesn't want that other parent there because of how are they going to color the situation, and there's too much tension between the parents. So I've definitely seen that where you have really no relationship, and it's kind of facilitating that introduction. So I'll tell you another situation that I see a lot is where one of the parents has a substance abuse problem.
Absolutely, yes. And especially if they're unable to keep it under control, they can go for a very long periods of time not seeing their children.
And what I also see is parents that are very worried. Let's say somebody's been sober for like a year and a half or something, and then I'll have a parent saying, well, they say they're sober, but they're so good at fooling people. Or, what's my child going to do if they overdose like they did a year ago and the child's too young to call 911? Or what do they do about it? So, I mean, I see many situations where there is a relationship between them, but we have a parent who's just very worried about, is the other parent in a state and condition to where the child is safe going with them?
Absolutely. I have a substance abuse case where we have the father's very worried about the possible exposure of the very young child to substances that are left within excess, substances that look a bit enticing because of the colors.
Oh, gummies. Yes.
Yes.
Aren't we all just so glad that illegal drugs now come in friendly little gummies?
That looks so delightful to eat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and can be so strong.
Especially for a very small body.
Yeah.
Yes, the possibility of overdose is almost guaranteed when you're 2.
Yeah. So absolutely, we have cases where there's no relationship already between the parent and the child, and we're wanting somebody to help be there to ease that development. We have concerns about, is the child safe with this person because they have a substance issue? I'll tell you another situation I've seen where there's concerns about the mental health of the parent.
Yes. And in
So is
fact, we
that a
find,
common issue that you see?
I would say clinically diagnosed, maybe not as common. Present, probably much more common than people realize. We often also will find that there is some overlap between the substance abuse and mental health challenge. So there's a lot of self-medicating tendencies.
Absolutely. There are
Among-
people that recognize that their things aren't working right and they're trying to make themselves more comfortable and
Correct.
they turn to substances. So I've seen that.
Yes.
So another reason that I see commonly where we're looking into supervised visitation is where a parent either has been inappropriate in the past or has been accused of being inappropriate in the past. And the jury, so to speak, or maybe the judge or the verdict is still out, right?
Right.
So there's a big question about, was the parent inappropriate or not?
Yes.
And then you've got this big debate, right? Because on the one hand, you've got a parent saying, nobody's found me guilty. There's an allegation. I didn't do anything. There's nothing wrong. Why can you cut off me from my child? And then on the other hand, you have a parent saying, what, we got to wait till the kid's dead? You know?
Exactly.
How can I protect him in the meanwhile? And what I see most often in those, the solution that we inevitably seem to end up at is supervised visitation.
Yes. And we have special provisions for sexual abuse, sexual assault cases.
Right.
We don't actually allow the accused parent to touch the child. We don't allow gifts because all of those can be triggering
How
events
about
for
on
the
the
child.
child's birthday? Can the parent not give them a gift on their birthday?
No. No, they can give them. They can give them a special experience, take them to a fun location. But in those kinds of scenarios, it's so damaging to the child that we're very restrictive in a sexual abuse case.
So I talked about bad behavior. There's definitely the allegations of sexual abuse that are out there, but there are also parents that have issues with temper and
Yes.
discipline, and there's concern for,
Now, domestic violence, we also
Yeah.
have some special provisions.
So what are the special provisions for cases where there's been allegations or even findings of domestic violence?
So when there's findings of domestic violence, we will offer opportunities for the pickup and drop-off location to be separate from the visit location so that there's no possibility that the two parents will interact and that, in fact, the accused parent will not even know where the custodial parent is going to be.
Wow.
And that facilitates the custodial parent feeling much safer about the possibility of getting within the proximity of the accused parent. I will say, we get back to the gifts thing. In domestic violence cases, we will not, unless both parties agree, we will not allow gifts to go back home. So the parent may give a gift to the child, but they have to take that gift back home with them. And the child doesn't take it home. And the reason is
Well, I can see the
because
kid feeling like that's not much of a gift then.
they might. But the reason is because there's been quite a bit of history where in cases where domestic violence...
There are bugs.
Yes. There are bugs. There are messages.
Inside the teddy bear is a
Inside-
little tracker.
And they can be very difficult to find. And we will always search
Wow.
anything that goes back and forth, regardless of whether it's a domestic violence case or not. But if there are actual findings of domestic violence, absolutely, we won't allow gifts to go back unless both parties agree. Because if both parties agree and we've already expressed our concerns about this and their lawyers are on board, there's
Then-
not much we can do.
Sure. So I will tell you, I think in most cases people look at supervised visitation as a real punishment for the parent being supervised. And I definitely understand that. I frequently, it very much comes across that way. I can tell you as a board certified family law attorney, there are some times that I want the visit between my client and the child supervised for my client's protection.
Absolutely. We run into that a number of times, actually.
So explain to the audience, how can that protect the visiting parent?
So if the visiting parent has been accused of speaking ill of the other parent, of not knowing how to take care of the child, of if they've been accused of inappropriate touching, and they want to see their child, and the case is still ongoing, and there's for lack of better terminology, the jury is still out
You're right.
about whether or not these accusations are accurate, having the supervised visit can protect that parent during the course of the court case.
And I will tell you, I have been personally involved in cases where you have a child who, every time they see a parent, is making an accusation that the parent was inappropriate under circumstances where clearly it wouldn't happen, right? Like there are other people there in the room the whole time, or they know they're being watched with a magnifying glass, and yet the stories come out.
Oh, yes.
And that's where I find in particular, unfortunately, people like to say a child would never lie, right?
That's not been my
But,
experience.
right. So, in fact, do you find times where your supervisors have been there writing down everything, and the child comes back and says, Daddy spanked me or touched me or this?
Absolutely. In fact, I had a case very recently where a young girl was on the visit with the father, and the father was trying to encourage her to join him and the other children, and she was resisting. So he came over and he put his arm around her shoulder to encourage her.
Come on, join us.
Come on, let's join us. She turned her head into his arm and started gagging and choking, and his arm was still positioned very loosely, and the monitor was right there. She could see everything. And the child goes, he's choking me. And then went home and told her mother, and the mother filed a CPS report.
Wow. And so in that case, that father, best defense was there was a paid supervisor observing
The whole
everything.
thing. Exactly.
Everything.
We had photographic evidence as well. We made sure that we waited about 30 minutes for any bruises to show up and took a photo to ensure there was no evidence of damage, as well as, of course, the testimony of the monitor.
Yeah. So actually that brings up probably putting the cart before the horse, the answer to the question that I think a lot of people have, which is, well, good gosh, if you've got parents that are so horrible that they can't be trusted with their own child alone, why are you allowing them anything? Why not just, cut off the visits? Why do you have visits with people that are considered so dangerous? And I think you just gave a great example of why.
Yes. I also find that even when people make poor decisions for themselves, that doesn't mean they don't love their children, and it doesn't mean the children won't benefit from knowing that they are loved by both of their parents. Particularly in cases of mental health or substance abuse,
Yeah.
I find that the parent, it's not a lack of love per se for the child, it's a lack of willpower, usually because that parent may have been damaged in their own past, but for whatever reason, they aren't safe for the child to be around alone. They should be supervised, but it benefits the child to see them.
Now, I will say that I do think some people go too far to try to preserve a relationship that is harmful or dangerous.
Yes.
And there are times when it is very appropriate to terminate and cut off that relationship, right?
Yes.
But I think the big problem is, how do you know? And on the one hand, you've got constitutional and God-given bond, and right for a parent to be there and parent their child. But on the other hand, you've got this huge humanitarian and constitutional obligation that we have to protect the defenseless.
Yes.
And how do you bridge that where somebody's got this incredible human right to be a parent and somebody else has this incredible human right not to be abused, and how do you decide which right is more prevalent? And I will tell you, as an attorney, I've found a lot of those answers by reading through reports from parenting supervisors.
I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah.
That is exactly one of the roles we seek to serve. I would say a lot of times it comes down to the child's reaction, right?
Right.
If the child is inconsolable, they just don't want to see that parent, we're not going to force them. We're going to try to understand why. We're going to ask a few questions separate from the visiting parent.
Right.
So typically this does tend to occur before the visiting parent even arrives. I did just recently have a visit that was set up with exactly that scenario where the child was dropped off by the custodial parent at the visit location. The monitor was there and the child was saying, "No, I don't want to see mommy. I don't want to see mommy." And so the monitor asked her, she said, "But I'm here to keep you safe. That's what I'm here for. I'm here for you. Anything you need, I will provide to you. What can I do to help you feel safe?" And she says, "Nothing." And she just started sobbing uncontrollably. And she couldn't calm down for 20 minutes. We called the visit.
Yeah.
You can't force a child to re-traumatize themselves.
So I will say I've definitely been involved in cases where we did reunification therapy, where you had a child who was very adamant that they weren't going to see the parent, and they worked with a reunification therapist, and they were able to establish a very positive
Absolutely.
relationship. But that wouldn't be the job of your organization, right?
No, so that should happen prior to coming to us. And we offer a service that is in between. Reunification therapy and regular supervised visitation. It's called Therapeutic Visitation. It is performed by a qualified mental health professional, so an LMSW, LCSW, LPCA. And what they do is you can think of it like play therapy, except it isn't officially therapy, right? It's a step down. It is easing that interaction into sort of a normal public interaction with the parent where it's more comfortable for the child and somebody's guiding the interaction. That's the big difference between therapeutic and supervised.
Because most of the time, the goal of the supervisor is what?
You're a fly on the wall.
Yeah, like they're not even there,
That's right. But this is different. Therapeutic is different. We are guiding the interaction.
So right before you and I came down here, I actually took a moment to try to pull up for you a clip from A Marriage Story where there is a court-appointed monitor there to observe the visit between Adam Driver's character and the little boy. And you've got, the woman sitting there very awkwardly, and he's like, "Can I get you something to drink?" Or, "I don't want to eat," even though they're eating, or, and I'm just fine with water, And you're left from that thinking, how can this person possibly report to anybody what this relationship is like? Because it's being colored so much by her presence just sitting there.
And it is. That's absolutely true. We actually have in all of our reports a little statement that specifies supervised visitation is an artificial environment. You cannot read into it any assumption about the true parenting capabilities of the parent. It is meant really to provide evidence of either to protect, so there was a lack of certain behaviors, or if you do see presence of certain behaviors, that can be indicative, because even if they're being monitored and they still do certain things, like I have a client, I'm doing a lot of these stories, I have a client who does suffer from some mental health challenges, and her daughter had a scratch. And when she saw the scratch, she said, "What's that?" And her daughter says, "Oh, my dog scratched me." And she says, "Well, that looks like you were attacked with a weapon." And wouldn't drop it, kept going over and over that. We did have to terminate that visit as well. And, I feel sympathy for the mother's challenge.
And for the child.
And for the child especially. Because the child was very taken aback. It's like, well,
no, my dog just scratched me. As playing.
What is causing this reaction, right? And so, yes, it definitely created some discomfort for the child, which was why we did have to terminate that visit.
So let's talk about what supervised visitation looks like. So like I said, I see it in two general scenarios, right? So here in Montgomery County, we're fortunate, I feel, to have Access Builds Children, and you sit on their board, and it's a nonprofit organization.
Correct.
And what are the costs of supervised visitation, and what does it look like if you're doing it through Access Builds Children?
So at Access Builds Children, it's in a facility, and it's a fairly...
Candy Cane Park, isn't it? Or is it not there anymore?
Oscar Johnson Center.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Oscar Johnson Center is very nice, but it feels a little
like
cold.
Busy in a prison.
Yes, it does. And it's group visitation. So what I mean by that is you have one monitor for two families. Some group visitation centers will do more families per monitor.
I've seen as many as 4 or 5.
Sometimes when we don't have enough monitors. The goal is to keep it to 2.
Right.
Yes. And so you're not going to get the same kind of information from those reports. They're not going to be able to as easily spot parental alienation concerns or stop whisper impact. So a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, sometimes we'll have a parent that will try to communicate with a child something they know should not be communicated. And that can be any number of things, everything from "I'm going to steal you away to California" to "Why don't you tell the police that your daddy did this?"
Yeah.
And that's one of the things supervised visitation is designed
to try to
prevent. But in that kind of group scenario, it's very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult.
So the visits at Access Builds Children, they're 4 hours, right?
Yes.
Now, I used to say it's just on the 1st and 3rd, but now y'all have expanded, right?
Yes, every
saw
weekend.
That. Every single weekend it's
That's
available,
correct.
which is wonderful because, some parents can only do like the 2nd and 4th, and I
That's
used to
right.
tell them, well, then you're going to have to go through private pay because that's the only option, but now it's available all the time. So it's 4 hours. So during that 4 hours, for instance, are there toys available, or what do
yes.
they do? So the facility already has toys.
Yes, we do have toys. We do allow people to bring food in. If they have special games or things that they'd like to bring in, they can do that as well. Of course, we check
Yeah.
to make sure there's nothing
And
else.
how many families are there on a typical weekend?
Oh, that's a good question. It varies widely right now because we just recently opened up the second and fourth
Right,
weekends.
which is fabulous. I think that's
So-
really helpful
We only have maybe 2 or 3 families on those weekends currently.
because they're not court ordered.
Because
All
they're not
my orders
court-ordered.
I've written say first and third.
Yeah, exactly. So first, third, and fifth, it's pretty full. It's 12 or so families at one time, maybe more than that, depending on the available space.
Okay.
We do have the ability to do some private visits. We have a case right now with a young child with food allergies.
Ah,
And because people are allowed to bring food in, it makes it so that you would want to protect that young child because, as we all know, toddlers
peanut
put
allergies or things.
everything in their mouth. Yeah, you gotta be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. So the parents can bring toys, but there are toys there. They can bring food. Are there snacks available if they don't? How about diapers or?
We do have some limited resources for some things, but it is expected, and all parents are told that they are expected to bring what their child needs. So if they're seeing a small child, they're supposed to bring a diaper bag, with food, with diapers, with wipes, with...
And can I tell you, that's something I always see in the reports.
Yes.
So I tell my parents if they do it, if you don't have a change of clothes for the child, if you don't have diapers, if you don't have wipes, if you don't have goldfish snacks or sippy cups, or, whatever is needed, I'm going to be reading in a report, and so is everybody else, about how you showed up and the child had nothing to eat for 4 hours. You got a 2-year-old; they can't go that long.
No,
Make
they
sure you have this.
Or showing
Bring
up without a
activities.
stroller where they could nap.
Or a car seat.
Yes.
Now, of course, at Access Builds Children, they're not going anywhere. They don't need a car seat.
No.
So let's talk about how much. You said in most cases it's free. Now, it's not always free, right?
Oh, I wouldn't say in most cases it's
right.
free. We
You
have a
strive to
sliding
make it
scale.
available.
We strive to make it available. We have a sliding scale based off of income. So most of our families pay something.
Okay.
They're not footing the full bill by any stretch, typically.
Right.
And we do have the ability to offer full scholarships in rare cases.
Okay. So now the other program that you have involvement with, you're the owner of Monitoring Angels.
Angels Monitoring.
Angels
Houston.
Monitoring in Houston and North Houston, right? So that is a considerably higher cost, right?
Substantially higher, yes.
So how much is the cost of private pay monitoring, and why would somebody be willing to pay that difference?
So we charge $65 an hour for up to 2 children, and there's a couple of benefits you get from that. One, you get the more detailed reports. Those can be valuable, particularly if you're trying to protect yourself from certain accusations. Additionally, you're in the community. So the children are going to be having quite a bit more fun.
So they can go to Chuck E. Cheese or the
Yes.
park or their soccer game or
The zoo,
whatever.
or yes,
Yeah.
a museum. Yes, we've had people take their kids to the beach, go camping, any number of different things. And it's limited by the parent's imagination and the age of the child.
And the cooperation of the child.
Absolutely. And the parents' available funds.
Sure.
So we have some families where they're really not able to afford the full time they've been awarded, which I always think is a shame.
Yeah.
And I do try to provide some discounts when I find a case like that. If it seems like they really are strapped, but there's a limit to how much of that I can do because we are not a nonprofit. The only source of income is what is paid by the client.
So what are the credentials of your monitors?
All of our monitors that I hire here in the Houston area have at least a bachelor's in social work, criminal justice, psychology, something in that related field. The reason I choose that is because I want them to have experienced knowledge of how to de-escalate tense situations, how to recognize signs of impending violence, or distress in adults and possibly in children. I like them all to have experience with children before I hire them. So maybe they worked as a nanny before they went and got their social work degree or something like that. Or maybe they taught for a period of time. And I also try to have as many of them as I can be licensed. So a licensed Bachelor of Social Work, or I have a number of my monitors, at least half of them have a master's degree.
Wow.
The master's could be in education, could be in psychology, could be in social work. And I do have some LMSWs and LPCAs that provide the therapeutic monitoring.
And also, if they're private pay, they can do other than the Saturdays, right? They can do other
Absolutely.
days. They can do evenings. They can have like a child attend their wedding, or
Yes, all of that is true. And I will say it is a little more difficult to find monitors for the daytime hours.
Yeah.
As we grow larger, that will no longer be a problem. We'll be able to offer that easily. But yes, we offer holidays. That's something you don't find at the community resource options. We offer the weekends and the evenings as well. Yes.
So let me ask you: do you see a conflict of interest at all in your being involved both in the nonprofit and the for-profit monitoring system?
That's an excellent question because it could very easily be a conflict of interest. I stay strictly out of the financial side of Access Builds Children. What I'm there
Which
to
is called
provide,
ABC. Just
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
If we use that, you know what we're talking about.
Correct. What I'm there to provide is expertise on supervised visitation policies and procedures.
So you help draft their policies.
Yes, we just did a revision, and so I've helped with that. I've helped with encouraging our director, Kayla. She has gone through additional training with the Supervised Visitation Network. I brought all of that to the attention of ABC as well. I know they had done all of that training in years past, but they're, as you get new staff in, you get new board members, sometimes people are less familiar. So that was something I was able to bring as well.
Well, and I think you forget, really. It's like, I know every year we listen to the same things about privacy and everything, but the more you hear it, the more it sinks in, right? Some
think
things
that's true.
can't be overstated.
Yes,
And you're certainly doing very delicate work.
it definitely can be.
So let me ask you this. One of the things that I have seen when I have been involved in people that are given permanent supervised visitation, and I make a distinction there because sometimes we'll do it during temporary orders. And the idea is, like, for instance, you have a parent trying to reestablish a relationship. We're not saying they have to forever be supervised, but maybe you've got a very nervous parent and we want to give it a little while, and after they've done a few visits, the kid's fine, the other parent is relaxed a bit, and we can all agree to do something more normalized, right?
Correct.
But then you've got other cases where I might write up an order, say, where you have a parent with a substance issue, right? And the order might say, okay, when they provide a clean hair follicle, then they can register and begin supervised visitation.
Yes.
And after 6 months of that, then they can, and we do stair steps, and there's like a triggering event. And I've written some orders that just provide nothing but supervised visitation forever.
Yes.
So I will tell you, one of the things that I've learned, because I've been doing this a really long time, is when I write up an order that's for permanent supervised visitation, I always include a provision that says if they go X amount of time without exercising it, then they have to provide so many days notice, or it's forfeited, or they're going to have to bring it back to court. I'm not doing that to be mean. I'm doing that because I've been doing this a long time, and I know a lot of people given supervised visitation don't ever do it.
That's very true.
So,
and it's so sad
yeah.
because it really does benefit children to know where they came from, to know their parents, and to feel loved by them. Because kids will make things up in their heads. They need a story.
Right.
They
And it's
need to
it's
know where they
not
came
as
from.
though they're not aware that a parent's missing, right?
That's correct.
They know that most people have two parents and they don't.
Correct.
So they're aware of that already. What percentage of people that are awarded supervised visitation on a permanent basis do you see following through and exercising?
I don't have very many here in Texas that have been given permanent
So
supervised
mostly you see
visitation.
the temporary orders.
Almost entirely. And I will say the temporary orders, especially when there's a step-up phase structure, those tend to be our easier cases because usually there's not. Now, let me put a little bit of a limit on that. Unless it's been a very long-running court case. If it's been a
And
very
there are a
long-running court
few.
case, then the families are high conflict in at least one way, and it's anybody's guess how long they'll actually be with us. But yes, we have a number of families that we've helped get through that phase one requiring supervised visitation, and then they say goodbye, see you later, and
Yeah, I'm not. They're
they
not.
hope never to see us again, and we hope we don't see them again. And it's not because we don't like them.
But because hopefully they
hopefully
can
they
now
never
long
need
have
us.
a healthy relationship and are able to exercise it.
Precisely.
And you know, I will say I think Dr. Fawcett, y'all provide an invaluable service because especially in situations where there's an allegation, and I wish you could say if a child says it, it's true. But anybody who's ever heard a story about the dog eating the homework or whatever know that not everything a child says is true. Right?
Absolutely. And not only that, but children will often lie because they feel like someone they love wants them to,
Even if they haven't asked them to.
even if they haven't asked them to.
And I will say I've definitely seen that where
Yes.
one parent is convinced the other parent has made the child hate them. And but that doesn't mean that the child doesn't kind of sense, oh, it makes mommy, daddy happy when I don't want to see the other parent.
They're biologically driven to want to make their caregiver happy, right?
And they're going to react in whatever way they think the caregiver secretly wants.
Yes.
And I've
it's-
seen parents that say, that's ridiculous. I don't want my child to say the other parent's abusing him. I mean, yes and no. Sometimes it makes the other parent feel more important, more needed,
Yes.
justified. There's definitely elements that,
Yes.
and children,
They pick it up.
they know more about what's going on around them than I think most of us give them credit for.
I think what people don't realize is that the younger a child is, the more dependent they are on their observational capabilities to keep them alive. I did research in my previous career on childhood severe anxiety. We were studying rhesus macaques. And so I'm a geneticist by
Okay.
training. All of that background was to identify genetic components leading to severe childhood anxiety. And one of the biggest things that I came away with from those studies was the fact that there really is a direct link between the observational capabilities of infants and their survivability.
Wow. So I've got to say, I would not have guessed that. Can you give me an example?
So, for example, there's a fear response that is called freezing in rhesus macaques. Human children do it too, which is that when they don't feel safe, especially if they don't see their primary caregiver, they'll freeze. They won't move. They stay perfectly still, and they're just listening. So you will find that human children will do this too when mommy and daddy are fighting.
They want to just shrink away.
Yep. But they're paying attention to everything. They're hearing everything because they have to make sure they stay alive.
And that's so harsh to think about, but I will tell you the number of times I've had parents like, oh, I want you to hear this tape. And it will be the two parents having this horrific argument, saying terrible things about physical or sexual abuse or manipulation or whether they're loved or walking out. And then I hear in the background, children, you know? And I'd be like, oh, was your son, daughter there for this conversation? Oh, but don't worry, they don't understand it.
Oh, yeah. At the very least, they're going to understand your tone, and children understand what's spoken around them far before they can speak themselves.
Yeah, I absolutely would agree. Well, Dr. Fawcett, is there some advice that you'd like to leave our parents with about what they can do to help their children deal with transition to separate households, or how they can make it easier on their child when they go to visit with the other parent?
I do recommend that parents take the time to prepare themselves to be calm about taking their children to supervised visitation. Make sure that you are expressing, not just with your words, but with your body language, that this is
you're
okay.
not worried.
You're not worried. You're not angry. You're not upset. You're comfortable. You're calm. That does more to help a child receive the benefit from supervised visits that they can receive than anything else. And honestly, it's kind of a good lesson, I think, dealing with children in general. You don't want to take your own anger and upset out on your children, even tangentially. You want to remain calm.
So if I can push that just one step farther, I love where you say, don't seem worried or anxious when you take them. How about when you pick them up?
Oh my goodness. People don't realize that one of the fastest ways to influence a child about the other parent being bad is by acting extremely worried when you pick them up.
Are you okay?
Exactly.
Did they feed you?
Exactly.
Let me see. Do you have any marks on you?
Oh, and whenever I see that, I want to talk to that parent.
And is that in your
pull them
report?
aside. Oh, yes, it's in the report. Yes, it is in the report, because that is very harmful to children. And the parents, a lot of times, I don't think they realize it.
Yeah.
But yes, it's very harmful.
I will tell you my own position. I've got 5 children. I adore children. I really do. And I have worked for 30 years with so many parents. And I really feel like overwhelmingly parents sincerely love their children, and they do not want to hurt them in any way. I think the number of parents out there who would say, I'm going to make my kid hate their other parent is very small.
Exactly.
Very small. But that doesn't mean there aren't quite a few who are unintentionally causing it.
I think that is the vast majority of situations. Yes. And I think even with families where they don't require supervised visitation, when there's conflict in the family, they're causing harm to the children, usually inadvertently. They just don't realize what they're doing.
I would agree. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate your time. I think it's been very informative.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.